Welcome to the ProTicker Deep Dive. Right now, a single query that you type into a chatbot, it actually requires up to 10 times the electricity of a standard web search.
Which is a staggering amount of power when you multiply it by billions of users.
Exactly. And if you zoom out, the real magic of artificial intelligence, it isn't just some piece of software floating around in the cloud.
Right, the cloud is basically a myth.
Yeah, a total marketing trick. I mean, what we're really looking at is the heaviest, most resource-devouring, and honestly physically contested infrastructure project in human history.
It really is. I mean, the term cloud computing might be the best misdirection of the 21st century. It makes you think of something ethereal, right? Something weightless.
Like it's just data floating in the air.
Exactly. But when you actually look at what powers these neural networks, you're not looking up at the sky. You're looking at millions of tons of poured concrete.
And thousands of miles of high-voltage copper wiring, right?
Yeah, and industrial cooling systems that drink millions of gallons of water. It's a massive, staggering draw on the global electrical grid.
So that's what we are taking you on a journey through today. We're diving into the invisible physical architecture of global AI dominance.
Because you really have to look past the chatbot interfaces that everyone else is so obsessed with.
Right. We are going to unpack the staggering physical constraints of compute power, which are literally reshaping global geography as we speak.
And we'll walk you through the bizarre, dizzying, circular economics that are actually funding this whole boom.
Plus, we're going to explore the really high-stakes deployment of these models inside highly classified, air-gapped military networks, which is fascinating and terrifying.
Oh, absolutely terrifying. And then finally, we will shine a light on the shadowy global supply chain of smuggled chips, automated IP theft, and this wild next-generation cyber espionage.
Because, if you want to understand where the global economy and national security are actually heading, you have to understand the silicon and the money beneath it all.
Compute is really the new ultimate geopolitical policy lever.
Wow, the ultimate lever.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. For the last century, global power was measured in dreadnoughts, then nuclear stockpiles, then crude oil reserves.
Right.
Today, it is measured in exaflop and gigawatts. And the reason compute is such a powerful lever is exactly because it's governed by the laws of thermodynamics. It is physical.
You can't just email a data center across a border.
Exactly. You can't easily track a piece of software code, but you can absolutely track a multi-ton shipment of server racks. You can track the thermal footprint of a data center from space.
Okay, so let's ground this in the actual numbers, because the scale is almost difficult to conceptualize for a normal person.
It really is.
If we look at the baseline of global AI infrastructure right now, the United States is holding an absolute monopoly.
A total monopoly.
We're looking at the U.S. having an estimated 74% of the world's high-end AI supercomputer capacity.
Which is wild when you compare it to China, sitting at roughly 14%.
And the entire European Union is at a mere 4.8%.
Right. The gap is massive.
To put that in human terms, we currently have nearly 100 high-end servers for every 1,000 people in the U.S.
And the pace of the new construction is just entirely rewriting the electrical grid.
Yeah, in 2024 alone, the U.S. added 5.8 gigawatts of new data center capacity.
While the EU added about 1.6 gigawatts.
We throw the word gigawatt around a lot in tech, but can we just pause and translate what a gigawatt actually means in the real world?
Yeah, we definitely should. So a single gigawatt is roughly the maximum capacity of 2 standard massive coal-fired power plants.
2 entire power plants.
Exactly. It's enough energy to power hundreds of thousands of homes simultaneously.
So when we say the U.S. added 5.8 gigawatts in a single year, just for new data centers,
we are talking about a redirection of physical resources that honestly rivals wartime mobilization.
Oh.
The U.S. data center grid is currently consuming nearly 9% of total national energy production.
9% of everything we produce.
Right. And if you extrapolate this growth curve, global AI power demand could hit 117 gigawatts by 2028.
This is where the theoretical promise of AI just violently collides with the physical limits of human infrastructure.
Exactly. We are running out of power.
But wait, so if energy is the ultimate bottleneck here, you would naturally assume China has this massive structural advantage, right?
You would think so, yeah.
Because they lead the world in raw electricity generation. They have roughly 3,200 gigawatts of installed capacity compared to our 1,293.
Right, they build power plants at a speed the West just cannot match anymore.
Yet there is this fascinating, almost paradoxical situation happening in China right now. Up to 80% of China's newly built computing resources are currently just sitting idle.
It's completely wild. They have the power, they built the data centers, and the servers are literally collecting dust.
How does it even happen?
Well, it's a massive structural inefficiency. And it really exposes the danger of state-directed infrastructure projects that just don't align with technical reality.
So why were they built in the first place if nobody is using them?
You have to look at China's massive real estate slump to understand it.
Yeah, well, the property market crashed.
Exactly. Traditional property development stalled out, so local governments and developers desperately needed new places to deploy capital. They needed to keep building.
To keep GDP numbers up, basically.
Right, so they pivoted heavily into building data centers, and they built them in the rural western provinces of the country.
Let me guess, because land was cheap.
Land was effectively free. And crucially, energy from local coal and hydro plants was incredibly cheap and abundant out there.
Okay, I see where this is going. They built the supply where it was cheap, not where the demand actually lives.
Far from it. These rural data centers are located thousands of miles away from the major population centers.
Like Shenzhen and Shanghai.
Right, the tech hubs on the eastern seaboard. And this geographic mismatch reveals a really fundamental shift in how AI actually works mechanically.
Okay, break that down for us.
We have to separate AI into two distinct phases. You have training and you have inference.
Training and inference.
Yeah. In the early days of this boom, the whole industry was just focused on training the models.
Which is basically reading the internet, right?
Exactly. It's a brute force process. You take trillions of words, feed them into a supercomputer, and it crunches that data for months to build the neural network.
And for that, the location doesn't matter.
Not at all. For training, latency, which is the time it takes for data to travel across a network, doesn't matter. You could put a training cluster in a cave in the desert, feed it cheap power, and just let it run.
Right, because nobody is sitting at a keyboard waiting for a response. The training run just takes as long as it takes.
Exactly. But the industry has matured now, and it's shifted dramatically toward inference.
Inference meaning the actual usage of the AI.
Yes. It's the real-time application. It's the moment you, the user, type a complex prompt into an agent, and it has to reason, access a database, and give you an answer in milliseconds.
So that requires speed.
Ultra-low network latency, and has to happen geographically close to the user. I mean, the speed of light through a fiber optic cable is fast, but it's a hard physical limit.
So if your query has to travel 2,000 miles to a rural data center and 2,000 miles back,
The delay makes high-speed, real-time AI applications totally unworkable.
wow.
So China's massive build-out of rural data centers, which was optimized perfectly for the training era, has suddenly become practically obsolete for the era of high-speed inference.
It sounds like China built this massive 20-lane superhighway in the middle of a remote desert. Sure, you have the concrete, you have the space, the toll is cheap. But if nobody can drive there quickly enough when they actually need to commute to work, the highway is useless.
That is exactly what happened. You just have millions of dollars of empty asphalt.
So let me push back on the U.S. narrative here then, because we hear constant alarm bells about the U.S. energy grid being completely maxed out.
Oh, constantly.
Tech CEOs are complaining they can't secure enough power to build massive data centers near Northern Virginia or Silicon Valley.
Right.
But if ultra-low latency is the future of inference, doesn't that mean the U.S. energy bottleneck is actually a feature, not a bug?
I would absolutely argue it acts as an extreme forced optimization mechanism.
How so?
Well, the U.S. bottleneck is painful for tech companies in the short term, sure. But structurally, it prevents the exact kind of wasteful misallocation we just talked about in China.
Because they can't just build anywhere.
Exactly. American tech companies are fighting tooth and nail for power, specifically in locations where the network architecture actually supports that ultra-low latency inference.
They are forced to be utterly ruthless about efficiency.
Precisely. Every server they plug in near a major metropolitan hub has to generate maximum economic value because the power to run it is at such a premium.
It means the infrastructure currently being built in the U.S., constrained as it is exactly the correct infrastructure for the future of the technology.
Spot on. It's exactly what we need.
But if we are talking about billions of dollars in concrete and high-voltage copper, cutting-edge silicon, prime real estate, that naturally forces a much bigger question.
Who is paying for it?
Exactly. How on earth is this being paid for? Because when you start digging into the balance sheets of the companies buying all this compute, the financial architecture looks like an elaborate shell game.
The financial engineering underpinning the AI boom is honestly arguably more complex than the neural networks themselves.
That is saying something.
It really is. And it requires us to look very, very closely at how venture capital intersects with cloud computing.
Okay, let's look at the sheer volume of cash first, just to set the table. U.S. private investment in AI is astronomical. We are tracking over $470 billion deployed since 2013.
Which dwarfs Europe.
Yeah, Europe is sitting at around $50 billion.
Yeah.
And it leaves China far behind in terms of private non-state capital.
Right.
But the Federal Trade Commission has been aggressively investigating how this money actually moves. They've identified a structural phenomenon they call the cloud credit circuit, or sometimes circular capitalism.
This is a masterclass in ecosystem lock-in.
Yeah.
And we really need to walk through the mechanics of it carefully because it's wild.
Okay, let's do it. Walk us through it.
Let's invent a hypothetical startup to make this clear. We'll call them AIGen.
Okay, AIGen.
Got it.
AIGen has a brilliant team, a great idea for a new foundational model, but they need billions of dollars in compute to train it.
Which they don't have.
Right. So a massive hyperscaler, let's say a giant tech conglomerate with its own cloud computing division, steps in. And they announce a highly publicized $5 billion investment into AIGen.
And the headlines hit the financial press, right? A massive influx of capital validating the startup's valuation.
But wait, I'm looking at these funding rounds and something feels off. Is AIGen actually getting a wire transfer of $5 billion in cash? Money they can use to hire engineers or rent office space, or crucially, shop around for the cheapest servers.
Absolutely not. And that is the core mechanism of the cloud credit circuit right there.
They don't get the cash.
That $5 billion rarely leaves the tech giant's corporate ecosystem. Instead of a cash deposit, the investment flows to the startup almost entirely in the form of cloud computing credits.
Wow. So they are essentially given a highly restrictive voucher.
Exactly.
So they get this massive allowance, but they are strictly mandated to spend it at the company's store.
Precisely. AIGen takes those credits and they spend them on the tech giant's own server farms to train their model.
Okay, but here's where the accounting becomes fascinating, right?
Yes. When AIGen redeems those credits, the tech giant's cloud division books that usage as actual cloud revenue.
Wait, so the parent company takes the money it invested, hands it to the startup.
The startup hands it right back to the cloud division.
And the cloud division reports massive, surging revenue growth to Wall Street.
You've got it. That's the loop.
That is wild. So Wall Street sees the cloud revenue booming and assumes there is just this insatiable organic market demand for compute.
Yep. And that top-line growth boosts the tech giant's stock price.
And because their market cap just surged, they have the leverage to raise more capital and do the exact same thing again. Fund another startup with credits to artificially inflate the next quarter's cloud revenue.
It's circular capitalism.
How much of the booming demand for AI compute is genuine technological necessity from actual end users, and how much is just the same multi-billion-dollar pile of money moving in a circle to inflate corporate balance sheets?
That is the systemic risk currently looming over the entire sector right now. I mean, there is undeniably real enterprise and consumer demand, but the sheer scale of the demand being reported is heavily, heavily padded by this circular mechanism.
Which makes me question the foundational logic of federal policy right now. Look at the $52.7 billion GPTS Act.
Right? A massive bill.
That is taxpayer money heavily subsidizing domestic semiconductor manufacturing.
Yeah.
And that legislation was passed largely on the premise of these massive multi-decade demand projections from the tech giants.
Which are inflated.
Exactly. If a significant chunk of that demand is a financially manufactured accounting loop, what happens to the American infrastructure stack if the music stops?
It's a huge vulnerability.
What happens if AIGen fails to build a profitable product, burns through their credits, and just can't raise the next round?
You see a cascading domino effect. It's brutal. If the startups stall out, the cloud provider's revenue growth instantly flattens.
And Wall Street punishes the stock.
Brutally. Capital expenditure on new physical data centers freezes overnight. And suddenly the foundries building the silicon have a massive oversupply.
It completely exposes the fragility of relying on a concentrated loop of corporate venture capital.
It does. Now, let's contrast this circular corporate loop with how China is funding its ecosystem because it's a completely different ballgame.
Right. Over there, you don't have this complex cloud credit accounting trick because the state itself acts as the ultimate venture capitalist.
Exactly. Local Chinese government VC funds, which they often call guidance funds, they have poured a staggering $912 billion into key technology sectors.
$912 billion.
Yes. And out of that pool, $184 billion went to nearly 10,000 AI-related firms.
And they're accelerating too. Just recently, Beijing announced another $138 billion fund.
It is a fundamentally different philosophy of capital deployment, but it comes with its own severe pathologies.
Like what?
Well, the U.S. model, for all its circular weirdness, forces a ruthless market optimization. Startups like our hypothetical AI gen, they still have to show some kind of technical progress to get the next round of credits.
Right, you can't just be a complete failure forever.
Exactly. But the Chinese model, driven by top-down state directives, frequently results in massive capital misallocation.
How does that play out on the ground?
Local provincial officials are given quotas to develop AI industries. To meet those quotas, they will fund a redundant, uncompetitive AI company just to tick a box.
Ah, so we just throw money at anything that says AI.
Exactly. This creates thousands of what we call zombie firms that produce nothing of global value, but they are kept on life support by state subsidies.
We've seen this exact movie before with China's solar panel and electric vehicle industries. They throw a fire hose of state capital at a sector, build massive overcapacity of low-quality firms, and just wait for the market to consolidate.
Correct. So you basically have two giant experiments running in parallel right now.
The U.S. is running on a highly concentrated circular corporate accounting loop.
And China is running on an inefficient fire hose of state-directed capital.
And the winner of this race won't just be whoever spends the most money, it will be whoever translates that capital most efficiently into the physical layer we discussed earlier.
Exactly. Which requires us to look past the data centers and the bank accounts and zoom in on the actual hardware, the silicon chips themselves.
Right, because if big tech is playing this massive circular accounting game to justify billions in data center spend, they desperately need to drive the actual physical cost of that compute down to survive.
They have to. The margins demand it.
And they can't do that if they keep paying the NVIDIA tax. NVIDIA has been the undisputed king of the hill, selling the generalized GPUs that everyone uses. But the landscape is fundamentally shifting toward custom bespoke silicon.
It's the natural evolution of any maturing technological ecosystem. When an industry is brand new and algorithms are changing quickly, everyone uses general-purpose tools. You need the flexibility.
Right, you don't want to build a custom machine for an equation that might change tomorrow.
Exactly. But as the underlying math of AI begins to stabilize and scale, sheer economic gravity dictates a move to specialized bespoke hardware. You just can't achieve maximum efficiency on a chip designed to do a little bit of everything.
Google is pushing this harder than anyone on the planet right now, aren't they?
Oh, without a doubt.
They have laid out a massive custom chip roadmap extending all the way to 2027, utilizing TSMC's cutting-edge 2-nanometer manufacturing process.
And what's interesting is they aren't just trying to build one superchip to replace NVIDIA. They have deliberately fractured their supply chain into a highly diversified, multi-partner strategy.
Yeah, let's break that down. Google is executing a masterclass in supply chain leverage.
They really are. They have broken the problem of AI compute into its two constituent parts, training and inference, and they tapped entirely different partners for each.
So for training, which requires that massive, raw computational brute force to crunch trillions of parameters.
They partnered with Broadcom to design a high-performance chip codenamed Sunfish, the TPU V8T.
Why Broadcom?
Broadcom has unparalleled expertise in designing chips that can network thousands of processors together without losing efficiency. It's all about the networking at that scale.
But training is just the beginning.
Right. For the other side of the equation, inference, they tapped a completely different partner, MediaTek. They are designing the inference chip, codenamed Zebrafish, the TPU V8i. And we established earlier that inference is where the real everyday operational costs lie.
Right, serving a complex model to billions of users daily across search engines, mobile devices, enterprise software, that is an ongoing massive expense.
Exactly. By tailoring a piece of silicon, specifically and exclusively for inference, MediaTek is targeting a 20 to 30% reduction in operational costs compared to generalized hardware.
That's huge. So they basically divide and conquer. Broadcom builds the massive heavy lifter for the training phase. MediaTek builds the highly efficient low-power engine for the daily inference phase.
And because Google uses multiple partners, no single chip designer can hold them hostage on pricing.
It's brilliant. And we are seeing Google use this custom hardware to deepen their ecosystem lock-in with key partners.
Take Anthropic, for instance.
Yeah, they are a massive player right now, generating over $30 billion in run rate revenue. And they recently signed a multi-gigawatt compute deal with Google and Broadcom.
But they aren't just renting server space. That's the key. They are deeply integrating their Claude AI models directly into the physical architecture of Google's new TPU v7 chips, codenamed Ironwood.
And they are utilizing a technology called co-packaged optics.
Right.
Okay, let's slow down and explain the mechanics of co-packaged optics for you listening, because it honestly sounds like science fiction. What exactly does that mean, and why is it such a massive advantage?
To understand the advantage, you really have to look at the bottleneck in traditional computer chips.
Okay.
Think of the processing cores on a chip as bustling cities, and the copper wires connecting them are like two-lane highways.
Got it.
As AI models get larger, you have to push exponentially more data between these cities. Eventually, the traffic jams on those copper highways become catastrophic. The data just can't move fast enough, and copper generates a tremendous amount of heat when you push it to its limits.
So the processor is basically waiting around for the data to arrive and wasting power while it waits.
Exactly. Co-packaged optics completely replace those copper wires with microscopic lasers.
Wow. Lasers on the chip.
Yes. They build fiber optic connections directly into the silicon package itself. It takes that congested two-lane copper highway and replaces it with a 100-lane superhighway where data travels literally at the speed of light.
And generates a fraction of the heat, I imagine.
Yeah,
That is incredible. So how does Anthropic software specifically tie into this hardware?
So Anthropic uses an architectural design called Mixture of Experts.
Mixture of experts.
Right. Instead of having one massive neural network where every single parameter fires for every single question, the model is broken up into thousands of smaller, specialized expert submodels.
Oh, okay.
So when you ask it a question about quantum physics, a router instantly sends that query only to the physics experts, leaving the rest of the model dormant.
Which obviously saves massive amounts of compute.
Huge amounts. But routing that data requires incredibly fast communication between the chips. By perfectly optimizing their software to run on the laser-fast optical pathways of Google's Ironwood chips, they create a software silicon feedback loop.
A software silicon feedback loop.
Yeah. Anthropic tweaks the software to match the physical layout of the chip. And Google tweaks the next generation of the chip to perfectly accommodate Anthropic's routing algorithms.
It's like a bespoke suit tailored to the exact millimeter. I'd argue that creates an almost insurmountable moat. If a competitor wants to beat Anthropic, they can't just raise money, go to NVIDIA and buy the exact same off-the-shelf suit.
No, they can't.
They are structurally locked out of that specific, highly optimized hardware-software synergy.
That is the exact strategy. You cannot buy a software silicon feedback loop with a venture capital check. It requires years of deep engineering integration.
But the generalized GPU market isn't just rolling over and surrendering, right?
Not at all.
The U.S. Department of Energy, specifically the Argonne National Lab, is partnering with NVIDIA and Oracle to build a supercomputer called Solstice. And the specs on this machine are staggering.
Unbelievable specs.
We are talking about networking 100,000 of NVIDIA's new Blackwell GPUs to deliver 2,200 exaflop PS of compute power. Their stated goal is to use this brute force to create what they call agentic scientists.
An exaflop is a billion calculations per second. It is a scale of computational density that is almost impossible for the human brain to visualize.
The billion.
Per second. The Department of Energy's goal with Solstice is to unleash autonomous AI agents that can hypothesize new chemical compounds, design complex experiments, simulate material physics, and just accelerate scientific discovery in ways human researchers simply cannot match.
They're using raw, generalized computational power to brute force breakthroughs.
Exactly.
I look at an NVIDIA GPU like a high-end Swiss Army knife. It is brilliantly engineered. It can open a bottle, cut a rope, tighten a screw.
Yeah.
It's incredibly flexible and good at almost everything.
That's a great way to put it.
But Google's custom inference chips, like the Zebrafish, are like a bespoke surgical scalpel. It only does one thing, but it does it with absolute perfection. So if the entire economic future of AI relies on inference, on doing one highly specific task billions of times a day as cheaply as possible, isn't the Swiss Army knife inherently vulnerable? As the math stabilizes, won't everyone move to scalpels?
It is the defining tension of the semiconductor industry today. I mean, NVIDIA's core advantage is flexibility. If the underlying algorithms of AI change tomorrow, if researchers discover a fundamentally new way to build neural networks, an NVIDIA GPU can easily adapt.
Because it gets generalized.
Right. Custom silicon, however, is rigid. If you bake a specific algorithm directly into the physical pathways of a chip and the underlying math of the industry changes, you are suddenly left with a warehouse full of multi-million-dollar bricks.
Wow, that's a massive risk.
It is. But you are absolutely correct about the long-term economics. The margins involved in serving billions of user queries a day demand absolute efficiency. NVIDIA is trying to hold off this threat by rapidly accelerating their own custom design capabilities.
But Google's highly targeted multi-partner approach poses a direct structural threat to the general-purpose computing paradigm.
It really does.
Which brings us to the ultimate proving ground for these systems. We've mapped out the physical data centers, the circular finances, the bespoke silicon. Now we have to look at the most demanding, highest-stakes customer in this entire global ecosystem.
The entity that is accelerating deployment faster than anyone else, despite all the risks.
U.S. military.
Yes. This is where the theoretical academic debates about AI safety and reliability violently collide with the messy, high-stakes reality of national security and great power competition.
The Department of Defense has officially launched a massive platform called GenAI.mil. This initiative is bringing generative AI directly into Impact Level 6 and 7 classified networks.
And for context, these aren't just secure servers.
No.
Impact Level 6 and 7 means we are dealing with secret and top secret data. We're talking about highly classified intelligence, air-gapped networks, and secure facilities.
And Google recently deployed their Gemini 3.1 Pro model directly onto this secure platform.
The speed and scale of adoption within the defense sector is what truly catches analysts off guard. The Pentagon isn't just running isolated pilot programs here. They are pushing this capability to the absolute edge.
Yeah, through tools like Agent Designer, defense personnel have already built and deployed over 100,000 autonomous AI agents.
Over 100,000.
Let's just stop right there. 100,000 autonomous agents operating inside classified environments. That number is staggering. And frankly, it is deeply concerning given a massive, glaring operational flaw in these models.
Yes, the data blending issue.
Google's default offering for this platform includes an internal data set that actively scrapes open web content to provide real-time answers. Now, in a civilian setting, that's exactly what you want. You want your chatbot to know the news that broke an hour ago.
Right, for general use, it's great.
But in a defense context, pulling unverified, potentially manipulated data from the open internet into a highly classified environment, that seems like a recipe for catastrophe.
It is a critical systemic vulnerability. Let me walk you through exactly how dangerous this is structurally.
Please do.
Imagine an intelligence analyst using an AI agent to synthesize reports on adversary troop movements. The agent has access to highly classified, pristine satellite telemetry.
Okay, be good stuff.
Right. But because it is also designed to scrape the web, it might seamlessly ingest a highly sophisticated disinformation blog post planted by a foreign intelligence service.
Oh, no.
If the model hallucinates and blends that fabricated open-source data with the classified satellite intelligence, the resulting analysis isn't just mathematically inaccurate, it is operationally dangerous.
Because the analyst can't tell what came from the satellite and what came from the blog.
Exactly. When you fuse unverified open source data with classified intelligence without clear, unmistakable boundary protocols, you just destroy the integrity of the intelligence cycle.
What fascinates me just as much as the technical risk is the dramatic, almost whiplash-inducing pivot in Google's own corporate culture regarding defense work.
It's been a complete 180.
If we rewind to 2018, there was a massive internal revolt at Google over a Pentagon contract called Project Maven. The military wanted to use Google's AI to analyze drone surveillance footage.
Right, and the employees were not happy.
Roughly 4,000 Google employees signed petitions protesting that the company should not be in the business of war. And the internal pressure was so intense that Google's executive leadership caved and actually dropped the contract.
And they learned a brutal lesson about the opportunity costs of ideological purity. I mean, nature abhors a vacuum, and the defense industrial base certainly does.
Someone else is always willing to take the money.
Always. When Google stepped away from Project Maven out of ethical concerns, Palantir immediately stepped in, took over the architecture, and eventually expanded it into a $13 billion program of record for the military.
Wow.
Google's leadership watched billions of dollars and a critical foothold in the defense market evaporate overnight.
Fast forward to today, and the environment is completely different. I mean, there are still protests. Over 580 DeepMind researchers and Google employees have formally protested this new integration of Gemini into classified networks.
But this time, Google's leadership isn't blinking.
Not at all. They are fully, aggressively embracing the Pentagon. In fact, they are deeply undercutting the competition to secure their position. They're offering Gemini for government at an incredibly aggressive loss leader price of just 37 cents per agency.
Compared to OpenAI and Anthropic, who are charging roughly $1.
That's less than half the price.
It is a classic platform capture strategy. Google is essentially willing to operate at a loss to ensure that an entire generation of federal bureaucrats, intelligence analysts, and military planners become completely accustomed to the Gemini ecosystem.
They are prioritizing long-term platform lock-in over short-term revenue.
Exactly. However, from the Pentagon's perspective, they are highly aware of this tactic.
Right, the DoD isn't foolish enough to put all its geopolitical chips on a single Silicon Valley vendor.
Exactly. The Pentagon recognizes that artificial intelligence is evolving far too rapidly to rely on a single prime contractor. To prevent vendor lock-in, they have aggressively onboarded 7 different companies simultaneously.
They're bringing SpaceX, OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, Amazon Reflection, and NVIDIA all into these highly classified environments.
The strategy is to force a perpetual, brutal competition on capability, security, and pricing. It allows the military to seamlessly hot swap models as the technological frontier advances.
I have to be honest, I look at this and I see massive red flags regarding the speed of adoption. We're talking about the Pentagon entering what is essentially a vibe coding era.
Vibe coding, yeah.
You have military personnel who are not formally trained computer scientists or software engineers using natural language to spin up 100,000 autonomous agents.
Just typing in prompts.
Yeah. And some of these agents might be hallucinating web scrape data to assist in making life or death national security decisions. This feels incredibly precarious. Are we not prioritizing the sheer speed of deployment over the fundamental reliability and safety of the technology?
You are identifying the absolute core debate happening inside the defense establishment right now. The risk of moving too fast is severe, as we discussed with the data blending issue.
Right?
However, the counter-argument, and the one currently driving policy, is that the strategic risk of moving too slowly is existential.
If we don't do it, someone else will.
If near-peer adversaries are rapidly deploying AI to compress their decision-making cycles from hours down to minutes, the U.S. military simply cannot afford to manually process intelligence using legacy systems.
That makes sense.
The vibe coding phenomenon, where frontline users can build bespoke tools using natural language, it democratizes massive capability. It allows a logistics officer to build an agent that optimizes supply lines in an afternoon.
Which used to take months or years of software development.
Exactly. But you are right. It completely bypasses the rigorous, multi-year software verification and validation processes the military traditionally relies on.
So they are just winging it.
They are making a calculated gamble. They are building the airplane while flying it in highly contested airspace because they believe the adversary is already in the air.
Well, if deploying this technology safely within our own heavily guarded, air-gapped networks is this messy and complex, it stands to reason that keeping this technology out of the hands of our adversaries is proving to be nearly impossible.
It's a losing battle.
Which brings us to the shadow war currently raging for control of the physical and digital frontier.
The United States has enacted some of the most stringent export controls in history, specifically designed to choke off the flow of high-end AI chips to adversarial nations.
But the reality is that the global supply chain is fundamentally porous. We are looking at a system that is leaking massively at the edges.
The data backs that up in startling ways.
Yeah, recent reports indicate that over $1 billion worth of highly restricted, top-tier NVIDIA chips were successfully smuggled directly into China, completely bypassing the international export bans.
$1 billion worth.
And what's fascinating is how China is reacting to this systemic friction. Beijing isn't just relying on smugglers. They are taking dramatic top-down steps to force domestic independence.
They are actively instructing their own massive tech conglomerates, companies like ByteDance and Alibaba, to stop buying even the downgraded, legally permitted NVIDIA H20 chips.
They are forcing their industry to pivot to domestic Chinese alternatives.
This is a textbook example of unintended geopolitical consequences. I mean, the U.S. export controls were explicitly designed to starve the Chinese AI sector of the compute necessary to train frontier models.
Right, to keep them behind.
But in practice, by cutting off easy access to NVIDIA's ecosystem, the U.S. inadvertently acted as a massive state subsidy for the domestic Chinese semiconductor industry.
Because they had no choice but to build their own.
Exactly. They forced Chinese capital and engineering talent to rally behind domestic champions like Huawei and Cefmec, vastly accelerating their drive toward technological self-sufficiency.
So the U.S. is scrambling to plug these massive leaks in the supply chain, and they are deploying both legislative and highly technical countermeasures. Let's examine the legislative approach first, because this is wild. There is a proposed piece of legislation called the Stop Stealing Our Chips Act.
It is a highly pragmatic acknowledgement of reality. The U.S. government has realized that traditional customs enforcement, agents checking cargo, manifests at ports, it cannot possibly catch every suitcase or shell company funneling microchips across borders.
There is just too much stuff moving around.
The sheer volume of global trade makes it impossible. So this act proposes implementing a financial whistleblower program modeled after the SEC.
How would that work?
It would offer massive, life-changing financial rewards to individuals embedded deep within the global supply chain. They are targeting shipping clerks in Singapore, logistics managers in Dubai, corporate insiders in transit hubs.
They are trying to weaponize greed.
Exactly. By offering a multi-million-dollar bounty, the U.S. hopes to make the reward for reporting a smuggling operation far more lucrative than the bribe the smugglers are paying to keep it quiet.
That addresses the physical smuggling of the hardware. But on the digital side, there is a fascinating cybersecurity strategy being developed called differential access. How does that actually work mechanically?
Differential access is born out of a stark realization. You cannot keep a commercial AI model completely locked inside a digital vault if you want customers to actually use it and pay for it.
Right, it has to be on the internet.
It has to be accessible. The strategy of differential access intentionally shapes the architecture of how different users interact with the model. The goal is to give cyber defenders a structural programmatic advantage over threat actors.
Okay, give me an example.
For example, the system might be designed to recognize a verified allied cybersecurity firm and grant them deep API-level access to the model to continuously scan for vulnerabilities and test the system's defenses.
Okay, so the good guys get the full view.
Right. But if an unverified user logs in from an unknown IP address, the system strictly constrains them to a monitored, highly limited interface. It is about intentionally designing the access tier so that the defenders can move faster, see deeper, and react quicker than the attackers.
Because the attackers aren't just trying to smuggle the physical silicon anymore. They are actively executing operations to steal the actual brain of the AI.
Which brings us to model vulnerabilities.
Yeah, we need to talk about model vulnerabilities, and specifically something known as a distillation attack. Chinese AI companies are systematically executing these attacks against American frontier models.
It's happening constantly.
They log into platforms like OpenAI or Anthropic, and they use automated scripts to generate vast amounts of incredibly high-quality training data. They then use that generated output to train their own domestic models, like DeepSeek.
Let's explain how insidious this is. A distillation attack is essentially automated intellectual property theft executed at an industrial scale. Training a frontier model from scratch costs billions of dollars in compute power and engineering trial and error to get the model to reason correctly.
All the stuff we just talked about for the last hour.
Exactly. An adversary bypasses all of that. They query the American model millions of times with highly complex logic puzzles, coding challenges, and reasoning tasks.
They just ask it hard questions.
They capture the American model's perfect outputs, and they use those outputs as a pristine textbook to teach their own smaller, cheaper model how to mimic that behavior.
They are extracting the billions of dollars of R&D directly through the chat window.
Rapidly closing the capability gap for a fraction of the cost.
And it isn't just software attacks. We also have to look at hardware vulnerabilities, like side-channel attacks.
Side-channel attacks are brilliant in their simplicity and terrifying in their effectiveness.
Explain how it works.
Imagine trying to steal a master chef's highly guarded secret recipe, but you aren't allowed inside the kitchen, and you aren't allowed to taste the food. Instead, you stand in the alleyway outside. You listen to exactly how fast the blender is running. You smell the exhaust fan to detect specific spices. You monitor the electrical meter to see when the ovens draw peak power.
Oh, wow. By meticulously measuring the physical exhaust of the kitchen, you reverse engineer the recipe.
That is exactly what a side channel attack does to a silicon chip. The hacker doesn't try to break through the software encryption. Instead, they physically monitor the microfluctuations in the power consumption of the processor.
Just measuring electricity.
Or they measure the microscopic electromagnetic emissions radiating off the motherboard while the chip is crunching data. Because different mathematical operations require slightly different amounts of power, a sophisticated hacker can translate those physical fluctuations back into code.
Literally extracting the raw neural network weights directly from the hardware's exhaust.
Exactly.
It's terrifying. But it gets even more dystopian when you look at the new frontier of consumer-level espionage.
Yeah.
We have to discuss KimiClaw.
Yes! KimiClaw.
This is an application produced by a Beijing-based company called Moonshot. But it isn't just a standard app you install on your phone. It is an always-on AI agent embedded deeply into the operating system of consumer platforms.
And to function, it continuously accesses a user's files, applications, and private communications in real time.
The paradigm of surveillance has shifted entirely with the advent of agentic AI.
Completely. In the previous era of the internet, we worried about apps discreetly collecting our location data or quietly uploading our contact lists.
Which is bad enough.
Bad enough, yeah. But an agentic system like KimiClaw requires total continuous context to be useful. If you want the AI to draft a nuanced reply to an email, it has to read all your previous emails.
If you want it to schedule your week, it needs total access to your calendar.
If you want it to summarize your research, it has to continuously monitor every web page you browse.
I'll frame this with an analogy because the leap in intrusion here is just staggering. I look at a platform like TikTok, and I compare it to a security camera watching what you do in the public square.
That's a good way to look at it.
It sees the videos you post. It monitors what content you linger on. It tracks your public engagement. It is definitely concerning, but it is fundamentally episodic and external.
Right.
But an OS-level agent like KimiClaw, that is not a security camera. That is like giving a foreign intelligence service the master blueprints to your house, the keys to every safe, and the combination lock to your private diary.
It's complete access.
It doesn't just see the application, it lives inside the operating system. It sees the keystrokes before the app even registers them. It captures the private thoughts you draft in a document and delete before sending. The level of continuous, intimate data exposure is qualitatively fundamentally different from anything we have seen before.
That assessment is entirely accurate. When you grant an AI agent continuous root-level access to your entire digital life in exchange for convenience, the distinction between a helpful digital assistant and an omniscient surveillance apparatus completely vanishes.
It's the ultimate intelligence gathering tool.
And it's willingly installed by the user.
So, synthesizing everything we've discussed today, I have to ask you the most difficult question in tech policy right now.
Lay it on me.
How can the United States possibly protect its multi-billion-dollar software lead from distillation attacks and cyber espionage if these models inherently have to be outward-facing and accessible to be commercially viable?
It's the paradox of the industry.
Are we just trapped in a permanent cycle where American companies spend billions on R&D only to effectively subsidize the development cycles of our geopolitical adversaries?
It is the most wicked problem in technology policy today, and there are frankly no simple solutions. If you lock the models down completely behind military-grade vaults, you destroy the commercial viability that funds the innovation in the first place.
Right, because nobody can use them.
Exactly. But if you leave them open for commercial access, they are inevitably distilled, reverse-engineered, and stolen. The current underlying strategy of the United States relies heavily on maintaining an absolutely insurmountable lead in the physical layer.
The concrete and the copper we started with.
Yes. The belief is that even if adversaries steal the software weights, they will not possess the physical chips, the massive data centers, or the sheer electrical grid capacity to run those models at the scale required to achieve global dominance.
But, as we discussed with the porous export controls and the aggressive push for domestic Chinese silicon independence, that physical moat is under constant daily assault.
It is eroding very, very quickly.
And that brings us to the end of this incredible complex journey. For you listening, We have covered a staggering amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started by stripping away the illusion of the cloud, looking instead at the massive concrete data centers, the gigawatts of power, and the geographical paradoxes defining the physical reality of AI.
We waded through the bizarre circular financial loops of cloud credits that keep the billions of dollars flowing.
Yeah, and we stepped inside the highly classified air-gapped servers of the Pentagon to witness the dawn of vibe coding and the operational risks of deployment.
And finally, we navigated the shadow war of billion-dollar chip smuggling, automated distillation theft, and OS-level surveillance.
The reason it is so vital to unpack these specific layers is because artificial intelligence is no longer merely a technology story.
It is the defining infrastructure story, the core economic story, and the ultimate geopolitical story of our time.
Exactly. Whether you are prepping for a boardroom strategy meeting, analyzing global markets, or just trying to understand the modern world being built around you, you have to look past the chatbot interface.
You have to see the silicon, the money, and the battleground beneath it.
Which leaves me with one final lingering question for you to ponder. We started this deep dive by establishing that the entire American strategy for global AI dominance is based on hoarding and controlling a massive physical resource compute.
Right. The concrete, the copper, the chips.
It is all about securing that physical supply chain. But if global open source models continue to become radically more mathematically efficient, if we reach a breakthrough where you only need a tiny fraction of the compute power to achieve the exact same world-class reasoning results, will controlling the world's silicon supply even matter in 5 years?
If the models shrink, the hardware advantage shrinks.
Exactly. If the magic truly does become highly efficient, weightless software again, what happens to the massive geopolitical empire we just built on heavy concrete? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.